How has it been in review?
It's been interesting. It's been an interesting journey. As you know, I assumed duty on the 3rd of June last year. When I joined the APRM family, I really delved a little bit into the unknown. I've been, as you know, an ambassador in Southern Africa. I understand very well the multilateral setup, but APRM is unique in itself. So I had to quickly understand the dynamics first of the APRM, internally and externally. Internally, there is an organ of the African Union on good governance and democracy, and a staff of very diverse backgrounds, as all multilateral organizations are. And as you know, I'm from the Seychelles, coming from a very small island state of the Union. I had to also adapt very quickly to this new dynamic, and then diagnose the APRM. The first thing I had to do was to really find out, okay, what are the opportunities and what are the challenges? And we had this really extensive discussion internally first with the staff. I think, change begins internally with the staff. So we delved in a number of issues, challenges that we have as an organ of the African Union, as a continental secretariat. As you know, the APRM, the structure of the APRM, we have the continental secretariat and then we have the national secretariat. So first there was this sort of examen de conscience, so to speak, this deep dive into the APRM. And then where do we then, the next question was, how do we then position ourselves within the continent? The continental challenge is the bigger questions, the bigger global questions, because when you speak of development, the foundation is good governance. When you speak of peace and security, the foundation has to be good governance and democracy. So this is what I've been doing in the past year. And I had inherited, in many ways, a success story. Professor Maluka had really, done a lot of work in terms of the reviews, which is a core mandate of the APRM. And the big question then was, what do we do next? Should I continue?
Yes, please. What do you do next? Because I'm really loving this journey that you are traveling. Yes. What do we do next?
Certainly. No, but when you inherit a success story, the big question is, what is the next step?
How much can you change?
Exactly. So how much can you change? And change for the better, change for the worse. Change is not always necessarily for the better. So I was very careful not to undo the good things that had happened at the APRM. Sometimes, people, we come into a new place and we start changing things for no apparent reason. So I was very, very acutely aware of this. So what we did, we had an impact study on the APRM. What has been the impact of the APRM? And we found out that, we've produced 32 reports on governance issues in 26 member states. So the next question then was, what have we done with these reports? And we realized that there was a gap between the reviews, the recommendations, and the implementation. So we worked on a strategic plan that attempted to address these challenges, address the gaps, but also strengthen the different directorates of the APRM and the extended arm of the APRM. At the level of the continent, the arms are the national structures. So now we've developed a strategic plan. Now we have a plan on the way forward. And the focus of my mandate is delivering with impact and tangible results. We need to see impact. We need to see results. When you look at the governance trend on the continent, it's on the decline. So there is a downward trend in spite of all the work that we've done. So we need to also diagnose this challenge. Why is it that we're seeing this downward trend? And how can we first stop, arrest that trend, and then reverse it?
these challenges and these trends may be a result of many different factors outside of governance. Could be in economic conditions where the access to resources and all that. The challenges are different per member states. Within the African Union, then, how much of, in terms of how are member states receiving the work of APRM and working with you in that process?
You know the saying that says all roads lead to Rome?
Mm-hmm.
All roads lead to good governance and democracy. There are different challenges, but when you look at the cross-cutting issues, or when you look at the drivers of conflict, for example, or when you look at what's stopping country X from developing further, everything's linked to good governance. So we've realized that good governance is a foundation upon which everything else rests. And that being said, then, how do we then work with the other organs to make sure that first they understand that without good governance, that without strong institutions, that without democracy, that without accountability, that without good public service delivery, we cannot progress as a continent, and we certainly cannot achieve Agenda 2063. So in terms of the dynamics and the relationship that the APRM needs to have with the rest of the Commission and the Union, I felt it needed to change. And this is why I keep talking about repositioning the APRM. So we had to reposition ourselves, and I think this repositioning has been well received. Member states approved our strategic plan. Member states approved a lot of new ideas that were coming up out of the discussions. For example, we introduced e-governance as a sixth thematic area. And we realized that over the next 10-15 years, everything that we are doing today will shift towards this space, the e-space.
What does that mean, e-government, for those who are not aware?
E-governance basically provides a proper governance framework when it comes to everything that we do electronically, your AI, etc., etc. So this is a brand new space. And it's very different from the more traditional space that we know. We know government structure. We know our private sector structure. We know the civil society organizations. They are the traditional established communities and structure. And then we have this whole new community that has sprung up as a result of the advent of telecommunications, technology, etc., etc. And we've all jumped on this bandwagon without really understanding what this, for me, I call it a very fluid space, what this very fluid space is all about. Now, we are developing infrastructure in this regard. We're making sure that people have access to, internet, etc., which is good because we need to progress, and if we want to progress, we need to have access to the latest technology and make good use of them. So e-governance is exactly about that. It's about making good use of this new space because there are dangers. There's cybersecurity. There's data mining. As you know, AI relies heavily on data. Data mining of our sovereign resources, data mining of our resources. And information is today a resource. And how are we managing our resources as a continent as far as information and data is concerned? What sort of legal framework do we have? What sort of policy positions do we take regarding some of these, challenges that's coming out of that space? So we are developing, as we speak, a white paper, and we'll be sharing, of course, with, all different parties. So hopefully, at the level of the continent, we'll have a proper policy framework as far as e-governance is concerned. The e-space, that space is cross-cutting. It cuts across everything that we're doing. But if, for example, you want to provide better public service to a community that's out there in the rural area, you need to go, electronically. You need to provide services beyond the formal infrastructure. But how do you do that? How do you improve your public service? How do you address challenges with regards to, for example, corruption, using e-governance and better policies? We don't have this as much as we should have as a continent. And then we have another challenge, and that is the capacity. We don't have enough know-how as a continent to address this. So in many respects, our data and our sovereignty it's being taken over by other entities that are non-African entities, I must say.
Yeah. Ambassador, the very key issues you just mentioned from the beginning was good governance, right? I want us to explain, when we say good, good is a very universal word, right? And in your spheres of work, what does that good mean when you say good governance? And also expand now, I don't want to lose this issue mentioned in terms of partnerships. APRM, looking at, if you're talking about e-government, there's also a partnership that you can have, because we also have to benchmark in terms of other countries, even outside the continent, who are very good at this, what sort of information they are using. So Africa cannot operate in isolation. In terms of partnership, where does APRM stand? But I want us to firstly deal with this issue of good governance. What do we mean by good governance?
Well, good means good. It's the opposite of bad. It's everything that we do that makes our people, our continent prosper and grow.
Okay.
So we have different thematic areas when we speak of good governance that we look into. In fact, we have 6 thematic areas in terms of our assessments. Yeah. We look at, for example, political governance and examine if our member states are governing themselves better for the development, growth, and prosperity of their citizens. We look at economic governance. What are the policies that we have in place that will make the economy grow, produce jobs, and for the betterment of the people? We have socio-economic development, our health sectors, our public goods, our schools, etc., etc. So we examine the socio-economic development. We now launch our principles on corporate governance, because governance is not only the purview of the state. It is like you've said, partnerships. We have to engage the private sector, the business sector, and look at how they are running themselves, how they are treating the workers in terms of labor laws, how they're engaging in communities in terms of public-private sector engagements, corporate social responsibility, etc., etc. After COVID, we also introduced another thematic area, and that is resilience to external shocks, because we had the pandemic. How resilient are we? How prepared are we to address external shocks, be it a pandemic, be it climate-related shock or economic-related shock?
Yeah.
And this year we've managed then to introduce e-governance as well. So when we examine, when we conduct a base review, we examine all of these 6 thematic areas in terms of governance, how we managing all of that, all of these areas at the same time. But we also do targeted reviews.
Okay.
So a member state can approach APRM and say, look here, I would like to do a targeted review on
voluntarily.
tourism. We'd like to do a targeted review on a specific area that we feel perhaps we would like a diagnosis of how things are.
Interesting. The issue of partnership, you reflected that briefly. Are you looking at partners outside of the continent for benchmarking? How is that space?
APRM is an African homegrown solution, so to speak. It is African-owned, African-driven mechanism, and it is by design. It is by design that it has to be African-owned.
Okay.
And so what we do, we gather experts only from the continent. We believe we have enough expertise on the continent to address our own challenges. So when we speak of African solutions to African problems, APRM, we're doing exactly that. We seek the services of African experts when we do the reviews. This is a kind of partnership we have. But in terms of engagements with other partners, yes, we do. We have partners in terms of, financing. We have external partners that, just come on board. They support the APRM. They finance some of our programs. But APRM is an autonomous, African-owned and African-led organ. And we're particularly sensitive to that because we believe in homegrown solutions. We believe we have our own solutions to our own problems. And our reports should reflect the realities on the ground in our member states without any external influence.
There's been a lot of talk about having African-grown rating agencies, for example, this in the economic side, right? Do you see yourself, I know the modalities are quite different now because you're part of a very important institution of continental governance, the African Union. Do you see APRM in terms of even giving us scorecards, for example, to say, on this is one show? Because in most cases it's voluntary. Countries has to sign and to be signatories to this to say, please, we're inviting you over because we really want to improve in terms of our governance as well.
I think there's now an emerging debate about should the APRM move towards giving scorecards or should it remain a voluntary mechanism. In fact, this morning I was talking to a group of people who said, I think maybe it's time that, because this voluntary component element of our work, it's really not basically pushing member states to the maximum to do what they can. So it's a debate, it's an ongoing debate. The answer is not up to the CEO. The CEO, I really have no personal opinion about how we should move forward. I think the member states need to sit down and examine where we are, what we've achieved, and whether we can achieve and attain this mandate with or without this voluntary element of our work. But there is an advantage to when a member state comes forward and say, I would like to submit myself to review. For me, that speaks to political will. It's a humbling experience, of course, because nobody wants to look up to the mirror, have a mirror held up in front of us, and then we see the cracks, then we see the problems. Nobody wants that. But the fact that member states themselves come forward, I think there's a unique opportunity and a unique beauty in this in itself, and we need to value that. If we're going to move towards issuing scorecards, there is a growing appetite for that, but it's still an ongoing debate within the union itself.
Yeah, Ambassador. It's important that obviously this is an ongoing debate. I want to also now look at some of the reviews that we are constantly doing right now as far as governance is concerned. Where are we struggled the most? I mean, you've got about 40 plus members, right, in terms of the AU that were signatory. From national, provincial, local level, governance are different. The different system of governance is different. I mean, in South Africa, for example, I also want you to reflect on or to give a critical view of because I know South Africa is one of the countries that, besides hosting the head office of APRM, in terms of its active participation as well. I want to just give us a review in terms of when you look at the continent. where are the challenges of governance? Is it on the local, national, provincial? Is it on the coordination? What are the parallels?
I think we have a lot of challenges happening at different levels. So to sort of zoom in on a particular challenge, I think it's not fair to the collective work of the reviews that we've had over the years. What we're doing though is, and I've asked myself the same question, what we're doing now, we looking at the reviews and then trying to find out what are the cross-cutting issues that we have as a continent, because a review is for a member state and it's specific to that member state. And but when we look at all these reviews, we need to know as a APRM, as a continent, what are the cross-cutting challenges.
You don't do the comparison at all. You do country specific.
We've never done the comparison. So now the question is, we should do some sort of comparative analysis.
Learn from each other.
Yes, and then find out what are the cross-cutting challenges. I'll give you an example. For me, the most pressing challenges we have on the continent are how do we manage our resources as a continent.
Okay.
Yes, because this speaks to the wealth that we have as a continent. How do we value ourselves as a continent and the wealth that we have? Because once we know that we're sitting on 60%, for example, of arable land in the world, once we know that we have the biggest deposit of mineral resources and rare minerals in the world, once we realize that we have 1 billion youths and we have the youngest population in the world, then our posture with the rest of the world will change. You see, because we need to change our posture. I think certainly, and I don't believe we're doing this as well as we should. Africa is the richest continent in the world. And the language that we use, the posture that we must have, the narrative that we must have, the conversations that we must have, the negotiations that we must have with the rest of the world has to change. That is one. Second, the most pressing challenges of our time are young people. Everything that we do today, that we do tomorrow, that we're going to do in the future, and that we've done in the past, have a direct impact on the 1 billion youths that's under the age of 35. If we don't address this immediately, we're going to have a big problem on the continent. So it's not only a matter of ticking the boxes and bringing young people at the table and having a conversation with them. It's making sure that young people are leading. It's making sure that we invest in education, that we have an educated youth. It's making sure that they are prepared for the future, and the future will be AI. Jobs will be lost to AI. Making sure that they are prepared for the future, making sure that young people understand the continental and global dynamics, making sure that we understand what it is to be an African today without losing our cultural, our heritage, within all of these things happening with globalization. So we need to really support and create all the necessary conditions that will make these 1 billion youth thrive. Not only survive, it's not a matter of survival. It's a matter of thriving within the current global context. So in this respect, APRM, we're pushing so that 2027, the AGR report, because we produced an African governance report, the next report will be on youth. So we need to examine this big, I call it a big problem because it is a problem. It is a problem. And how do we then address these challenges that our young people are faced with? We cannot afford to fail the next generation. Agenda 2063 will never be realized if we don't value the wealth that we have, the natural resources that we have, and the youth dividends that we have on the continent.
Looking at the continent that constantly review itself, because one of the things that we often don't do is to look at, we always want to close doors. Countries have got their own national interests. Others will not necessarily say, no, please don't look at my own affairs. Those that actually voluntarily say, please come in. Why do you think they do that? On answering that question, speak about South Africa as well. I'm giving you that permission. Yes.
Thank you. South Africa has done the first and second generation reviews. It's in fact, I was just in a meeting with SAYA and our NGC in South Africa this morning. I was in a meeting with the focal point of the Republic of South Africa, Minister Buthelezi, and that reflects a level of engagement that South Africa has with APRM. The reviews have been implemented in many ways in part, but you see there are still some gaps. We feel that all reviews need to be completed, implemented in its entirety. But in Southern Africa, because South Africa now is part of Southern Africa and the SADC community, there's been a growing appetite to share best practice. I was in Zimbabwe last week. Namibia was there. Zambia was there, sharing their experience at the level of the MGC. And the things that come out of the sharing of best practice is really a wealth in itself, and you see these member states engaging with each other, and that was the ultimate goal, the raison d'être, so to speak, of the APRM, is to share best practice, to share knowledge. That's happening in South Africa as we speak. The SAYA meeting that's taking place at the Irene, we have participants from almost all Southern African countries. So the NGCs are meeting, we're talking about, how the NGCs are functioning, what are the challenges that they face with, and as a Continental Secretariat, our job is to listen, take note, and take action. And this is what we're doing. And it's these kind of platforms and partnerships that we have in South Africa, but in many other countries, not only in Southern Africa. I was in Sierra Leone 3 weeks ago, and we brought together a lot of member states talking about South-South and triangular cooperation, how the continent needs to wake up and realize that the African agency in the world, we have to take a lead. We have to take a lead in this respect. So it was a 3-day conference, interesting conversations. But we don't do only meetings and conversations. This is what I want to say as we wrap up. We are field agents first. We are there in the communities. And it's very important that we are engaged in the communities. When we do reviews, we move outside the capitals. We go to the communities. We go to the villages. We talk to civil society organizations. Yeah. We talk to women. We talk to youth. We talk to all different sectors of the communities and make sure that people are involved. At the end of the day, what do our African brothers and sisters want? They want to see a real change, a real positive change in their lives. They want to see better roads, employment opportunities, business opportunities, growth, education, etc., etc. So we need to move from policy to progress. We just need to shift our work from supporting member states to develop better policies, but to get them to implement these policies and make sure that there's real progress. And this is what I mean when I talk about tangible results and impact. We need to see impact in the lives of our African brothers and sisters, our African citizens. We are public servants. We serve them. And we need to discharge our responsibilities, knowing that every day we wake up, we go to work, we're doing it for African brothers and sisters, no matter where they are. Whether they are, they live in the townships, they are middle class, upper middle class, businesses, etc., etc. We have a duty to really serve them and serve them well.
That's quite important. Good way to conclude it. We are in conversation with Maria Antoinette Rose Quatre. She's the CEO of the African Union's peer review mechanism. Let's talk about, as we conclude, in the next years to come, what's happening at the APRM. The good thing is that you are a convergence, and I like the fact that you already alluded to the fact that as much as the meetings are happening with individual countries, the meetings that you are having with this country on a regional level as well, the countries are actually sharing knowledge in terms of good governance, and so they are already peer reviewing themselves among themselves also in the regional level. So that's very good to see. As we conclude, Ambassador, some of the issues and project coming up as part of the APRM's work.
Perhaps I'll start by talking about the end game, the vision. You know, when you start in a job, it's a year now, you always have to think of the end in mind first. You know, think of, okay, what do I want to accomplish in 4 years, perhaps 8 years, hopefully, if I'm still well and good. We need to absolutely reverse that downward trend. We cannot claim success if we've still not moved that needle. We need to do this. This is fundamental. This is important for the continent. How do we achieve this? This is where we develop programs towards achieving this. We have the African Credit Rating Agency, which will be operationalized in the next year or so. And that is to give another opinion over and above the 3 dominant rating agencies, so that we have a level playing field, and that our African member states gets a fair chance when it comes to the creditworthiness of the African. As I've said, we're sitting on a lot of wealth as a continent, and when that happens, when it's done well and successfully, this opens up a lot of opportunities for investment in the continent. So we're doing that, and we're well advanced in terms of operationalizing the African Credit Rating Agency. We're going to be launching the governance support program during the course of the next year, and that is also a game changer in terms of how we operate and engage with the member states. As I've said, when we do the reviews, we have the National Plan of Action. The gap has been implementation. So the governance support program is aimed at supporting our member states to implement the recommendations. What we've realized is that it's not only a lack of political will that has resulted in the lack of implementation. There's lack of know-how, technical know-how on the ground in our member states, and we need to empower these member states. And also, there is a lack of financial resources. So the governance support program is at once a fund and a program that will accompany our member states. Our job is not only to go in a country, we do the review, and then we leave, we pack our bags and leave. We have to be there and accompany these and see it through, make sure that the recommendations are implemented. So once we hopefully launch the governance support program, we'll see a shift. This needle has to change, and I'm very focused on this. Also, over the next year or so, we'll launch the communication strategy of the APRM. What we've realized is that operating in our capitals, it's not enough. We have to reach out to our African brothers and sisters, the populations. They need to know what the APRM is all about. They need to be engaged with the APRM, come on board for us to make the change we want to see. So we have completed the communication strategy. We've launched the podcast, and we have a comprehensive outreach program. Like I've said, our work is in the communities, in the villages where we live, where our citizens live, and this is where we should be. I'm not a person who's satisfied to just sit in a conference and deliver a speech and the work is done. The work is never done when we deliver a speech. The work is done when we see real change in the lives of our citizens.